Hey guys, this is a transition video, an introduction on going from a beginner's level method to a more advanced level method. So most cubers who start off when they just start off cubing, they learn beginner's layer by layer method where I'll go scramble the cube up. Most of the time the cross is solved on the yellow side, like the daisy method, which I can't find the last one, I'm pretty blind. And they bring them down and they make a cross. So yeah, first step is cross. And then the second step, they would insert their pieces in like this. So it makes a layer, and then they would insert the edges. And then they solve top layer with an alg. Usually it's a one alg method, or like they learn the A perm and something, but then I'm just gonna use 2look. So there are three main methods that you can branch off of after you learn your first beginner's method. So when you go from beginner's method, I have my sub 30. When you have your beginners, you can go to Roux. You can also go to ZZ, or you could go to CFOP. So these three are like really good methods, and they're the three most used methods as well. So there's also Petrus, which is the fourth most used method, but in my opinion, Petrus isn't that great, and which is why I don't actually know Petrus. I haven't bothered to spend my time learning it, but I know these three methods. So basically what Roux is, it's a block building method. So what you first do is you build the left block. So most of the time it's a 2x2x1 first, like this, a 2x2x1, and then you build a 2x3x1, which is then your first block. So this would be your first block, and then you build the other block using basically the same thing. And then you have two blocks now. So after that, you do CMOL, which is orienting and permuting these corners. So like, let's say you had a case like this, you first usually do the orientation of corners, and then you go permutation if you're lazy. And I don't know full CMOL, which is just doing all these in one algorithm, which is a total of around 40 algorithms, which might sound like a lot, but it isn't a lot compared to stuff like CFOP or like ZBLL, which is a variation of ZZ. So then after this, where you solve the corners and then the two blocks, then you finish edge orientation, which is also a step in ZZ. So edge orientation is where you make all the edges over here, these 6 edges, either white or yellow on the top or bottom. So this is a bad edge, and this is a good edge. These are good edges. That's also a bad edge. So you do something to solve them into your good edge, into all of them as good edges, and then you solve the rest of them using basically the M layer and U layer. Like this whole step, the last 6 edges can be done only with M and U. So the next method is called CFOP. So what CFOP is you first do the cross, which is usually pretty easy to do. And then after you finish your cross, you insert the pieces both at once. Like that, and then here. And then you can do your last layer as normal, and then you finish. So that's what CFOP is. And then there's ZZ as well, which is it's a method I'm not that good at, but I do know it. So what you first do is you orient all edges. So what that means is basically all edges are good edges, and there are some classifications for good edges, such as like white. If it's a piece with white, the white or yellow. If it's white or yellow, the white or yellow has to be on top. And if you have a piece, like, if I can find one, I can't. So if you have a piece which the blue or the green is like matching with the center that's in front of you, that's also a bad edge as well. But like, ZZ's pretty confusing to begin with. I'm actually pretty bad at ZZ as well, but there are many benefits to ZZ. It's just the original edge orientation, where you have to make sure all 12 edges are good, is pretty tedious and difficult. So after that happens, which is probably going to take like a lifetime, but I'm going to try my best to do it quick enough. I don't know where the last one went. Is it this? Yes. So after you do this, most of the time edge orientation line is done. EO line it's called, where you just do like a line, a half cross, and then you solve the left like 2x3x1, like what you do in Roux with like R and L and U. So something like this with the other piece where I don't know where it went. I'm blind. But it's the red piece over here, so something like that. And then the next piece. And then you have this, which could be done something like that. And then this. So now you solve your ZZF2L, and then you have all your edges oriented. The yellow cross will always be done if you did your EO line properly. So you can realistically do 3-look last layer, and even 2-look if you're happy about it. But the thing about ZZ that is really good is that during F2L you have no rotations, and all you need is R, U, and L moves. You don't need anything else. So it's a 3-gen method. So that's how it works. So I'm gonna write on here that Roux is a block building. And then ZZ is like primarily edge orientation. And it's also a 2-gen. It's a 3-gen after EO. It's a 3-gen after edge orientation. And then CFOP is, well, layer by layer, pretty much. So I'll just get a replacement for that really bad pink pen. So basically, there are many different pros and cons of each method. So like with CFOP, let me get another sheet of paper out. So there's like CFOP is, I spelled CFOP wrong. Oh well, that's a P. So the good things about CFOP is that it's very developed and many people use it. And it's also very easy to learn from the beginner's method. And it's also alg based. But that could be a good or bad thing. You don't know. Like, if you might like algorithms, you might like remembering them, so CFOP might be good for you, but you also might just hate remembering stuff, so CFOP might be bad for you. And it's also a very good 4x4 method and above. So it's very, very good for 4x4 and above, because there are some methods with 4x4 and even possibly 5x5 where your cross is already done, But ZZ, you still have to do the EO, and with Roux, it's very hard to do M layers with large cubes. So, but the bad thing about CFOP, the bad things is that it has a high move count. And it also needs rotations as well, which might be bad. And you also need to learn around 70 algs to get like fast, in quotation marks, because that would be two look last layer, where you have a last layer and then you can finish the last layer in 2 different algs, which I don't actually know. I know ZZ to LLL, but I don't know CFOP's 2 look last layer. So next up we have ZZ. So ZZ has like a relatively low move count. I'll just call it, I'll stick to move count. And also it's 3 gen, which means you only need R, U, and L moves during F2L. And also, like, it's a good OH method, one-handed method. And 2 look last layer is very easy to learn compared to CFOP and Roux, because you only need around 30 algs. And most of the like first 8 algs where you orient the corners, those ones are pretty easy to remember. It's only the permutation ones that are pretty difficult. And also, I said it has relatively low move count. There are also many variations as well. Could be good, could be bad, but like you have many different ways to branch out after you learn like a ZZ, regular ZZ, such as ZZCT, which requires 200-ish algs, and like maybe ZZA, which is many more algs. So yeah, there are many more variations off of ZZ, and it's probably better than CFOP if you want a better like learning curve kind of thing. But in general, it's like pretty hard because the cons, in my opinion, like outweigh the pros. But that's my opinion, because there are many ZZ solvers that are wonderfully good, like Chris Tran and Andrew Nicholson. So like one of the bad things about ZZ is that EO is very difficult to grasp as a beginner. And it's hard to do on big cubes. Big cubes as in like 4x4 and above. And then it's also like many algs for the variations. So basically it becomes like an alg learning machine thing. So that's what ZZ is. And then lastly we have Roux, which is my personal favorite method, but it isn't necessarily the best method. It's all down to personal preference. So what about Roux is that you have a very low move count. It's like 10 moves less than CFOP, which is a very good thing, because the low move count means that you will not need to turn as quickly to get around the same time as you do with CFOP. And it's also like full CMLL, so full top corners, like the permutation and corner. The corner permutation and orientation is very is not that difficult to learn. It's just 40 algs. You can search up full CMLL on YouTube if you want, and I'll also put a link in the description for like full CMLL and basically the algs that you can use for full CMLL. And it's also a good OH method. Now you might be thinking like, well, how good, well, whatever. So you might be thinking like, well, OH, you can use one hand, so how is using the M layer gonna be easy with one hand? Well, the thing about Roux is that, you know how the M layer step is 1/3 of the solve? Well, you can do that 1/3 with OH by just putting one side on the table and just spamming algs. Just spamming the M layer, wedging the M layer between the table, like that. Which is pretty good. And I moved the camera. Oh well. So, LSE, which is last 6 edges, is 2gen. And first block, which I'll call FB, is very easy to do, very efficient when done correctly. I probably spelt it wrong, cause whatever. But the cons about Roux is that look ahead is hard. You will get better at look ahead over time, but it's generally harder than CFOP and ZZ because you're gonna have to deal with looking at more edges. You have to deal with 2 more edges while looking at your pieces. You deal with 2 more edges. The centers don't matter in first 2 blocks, and it's also very flexible, which I'm gonna put in the pros. But it's hard to do on big cubes. Okay. And M layer is also hard to do when beginning, but I'm not gonna state that because it's not that much of a big deal. Because like I started off with a terrible M layer, but it gradually got better. So, if like at the start, block building is very difficult. Like I'm talking efficient block building. It's difficult, but the flexibility is that you're allowed M layers, and also you're also DNF prone as well, which isn't that much of a problem. I don't run into it as much, but it is still a problem compared to CFOP and ZZ, because with a +2, you can finish a solve like this, and that would be +2 seconds onto your time, because it's a quarter turn or even a half turn away from being solved. But this is considered 2 moves away from being solved, because you need an R and an L move to solve that. But generally it's not that big of a problem. I get more DNFs on CFOP than I do with Roux. So yeah, that's honestly about it. So I have 3 identical scrambles over here. So I'm gonna be using one cube to solve, like one method to solve each cube. So first I'll be using Roux to solve this. So basically with Roux you can be super efficient, and what I would do here is this as my first block, and then I have this piece which I can bring up like that to solve my first block. That wasn't a perfect first block, but it's good enough. And then I have this second block, usually takes many more moves. So now I have my second block, and then I can solve CMLL, which I know 2 look CMLL. I don't know 1 look, but here's CMLL, and then I have this piece at the back. So I do LSE here, and then I'm done with Roux. So next I'll do ZZ with this. So ZZ, you have to do edge orientation first. So what I'll do is I'll use this angle. So I know these 2 are bad edges, and this these 4 pieces, 5, and I believe that's a bad edge as well. So I have these 6 pieces as bad edges. So there's one there, so I'm probably gonna lose track of it. So at this point I might as well just like rotate, because when you rotate, even though it's not a good thing to rotate, you can do a Y2. So alright, this, and then I can do EO line now, which is this, and then I can solve here, which I will do this piece first, and then this at the back, and then you have this, which is pretty good, and then to look, and then over here I'm gonna do a CFOP solve. So something like this for cross, and then this for your first pair, second pair over here, third pair, and fourth pair, and then you can solve your last layer like that. So that's basically what CFOP, ZZ, and Roux is, and like the 3 different paths you can take after like going from a beginner's layer by layer method. So what to recap, what ZZ is a method which is based on edge orientation, and it's also 3-gen during the F2L layer, and Roux is block building, and CFOP is a layer by layer method. So what ZZ is it has a relatively low move count compared to CFOP, but it's not as low as Roux or a variation of ZZ called ZZCT, but that requires many algs. It's also 3-gen during F2L, which is a very good thing if you want to avoid rotations of the cube, which do take quite a bit of time to get good at, because a rotation requires like to spin the cube and to regrip to go onto your next turn, which takes up a bit of time. And also with ZZ, you also have the top layer cross-oriented, so you don't need to do an algorithm to orient that. And it's also a very good one-handed method, because you don't need to rotate that much. You need L moves, R moves, and up moves, which are pretty easy to do with one hand, unlike rotations, which are very bad with one hand. And the 2-look last layer is very easy to do with around 30 algs. And there are also many variations of ZZ, so if you think you're good enough with ZZ, which is probably not going to be in a long time, like maybe when you get to averaging 20 seconds, you could try learning another ZZ method. Like I would recommend ZZCT, but that's myself. So EO, edge orientation, is very, very difficult to learn at the start, which is a very big con. And it's also hard to do on big cubes, because trying to track the edge orientation is pretty hard. And there are also many algs for variations of ZZ, like 200 for one alg set, which isn't a lot, because there's like ZBLL, which is solving the last layer with one algorithm. That's around 400, so it's not that big of a alg set. So next we have Roux, which is a very low move count, and it's also very flexible as well. So there are 40 different algorithms around that you need to learn for full CMOL, which is like solving the top corners in one algorithm. And then it's also a good OH method as well, because you can use a table. And LSC, which is last 6 edges, is 2-gen, so you can use M and U and it would work. And first block is also very efficient. You can get your first block to around 6 moves if you're pretty good at first block, but sometimes first block does take 9 moves. But generally, first block is actually pretty efficient. So, but look ahead is very difficult, and it's hard to do on big cubes as well. block building, getting efficient block building is also very difficult, and you're also DNF prone as well. And another thing with Roux and ZZ is that your inspection will be basically based on finding one block. It's going to be you're probably going to take up like 12, around 12 seconds to get your first block down, at least like when you're starting off around 3 months. And ZZ, you're probably going to take a long time, so at the start I would use infinite inspection, which is what I did with Roux when I first started. And then we're going to CFOP, which is the most widely used method, and it's very easy to transition from. And it's also out-based, which is good or bad. It could be good or bad. And it's also a very good 4x4 and above method. So regardless of whether you like Roux or ZZ more, you should still learn CFOP. And it's not really going to be that difficult to learn. But a con is that it has a very high move count, and you have to have rotations in the solve. And move count and algorithm needed to get 2 look last layer is quite a bit. Well, not 2 look last layer, but 4 look, which is what I'm talking about. Because you would... No, wait, that would be, 2 look last layer actually. For 2 look last layer, it takes 70 algorithms to get fast. Because you need around 50 algorithms to do OLL, which is orienting the last layer, and then PLL is like 21 algorithms to solve the permutation of last layer. And so I'm gonna go read my notes because I didn't prepare. So I personally think that you should start learning CFOP, and then when you get to around 40 seconds of CFOP, you should then go experiment with Roux and ZZ and see which method you like the most, but just like learn it to the max and don't like quit in the middle, because that's what I did and I kind of regret it. I was averaging around 30 seconds with Roux with CFOP, and then I tried to test out Roux, but then I didn't fully learn Roux, and then it kinda was a bad thing on my part. It was a bad idea. But like, you should honestly just try to learn the full method. You don't really need to learn like all the CMOO algs and stuff, but just learn like how the method works and learn the efficient method, the efficient way of doing the method. And also, personal preference is key. Like, you do not ever get stuck to like doing Roux because I told you to try out Roux or something and that I like Roux the most. It's personal preference. Some people love CFOP to death, and some people like Roux, some people like ZZ, and some people even like hexagonal Francisco, which is another method. But like, personal preference is just absolutely key, because if you don't like the method you probably won't enjoy cubing as much as if you did another method. I average a faster time with CFOP than with Roux, but I personally enjoy Roux more, which is why I do Roux in competitions and regular solves. So yeah, and this basically ends the video. So thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. And make sure to stay tuned for the next videos where I teach you basic CFOP, basic Roux, and basic ZZ, and like the method and how the method works.